Don Evans. I'm the founding executive director of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. This is our 10th annual induction ceremony. So I'm going to start by just handing it over to Kathie Bergquist. Kathie is a wonderful writer, editor, teacher, and she's the perfect person to be our host for tonight. Kathie Bergquist.
Our next presenter, in fact, in reality, is Carlos Cumpián. As publisher and editor of March Abrazos Press, Carlos Cumpián is a passionate promoter of the work of Latino and First Nation authors. A poet in his own right, a celebrated poet, a beloved poet, Cumpián is author of the collections 14 Abril, Armadillo Charm, Coyote Sun, and the children's book Latino Rainbow, Poems about Latino Americans, along with two recent manuscripts that are ready to emerge in the world, which are a poetry collection, Human Cicada, and a poetic and prose memoir, Accidental Rebel. Carlos Cumpián was a Chicago high school English teacher for more than 20 years, which of course means and demonstrates that he is a man of great fortitude, courage, and creativity. Carlos is presenting to Carlos Cortez, whom he considers to be a mentor. March Abrazos is the publisher of Cortez's collection, De Kansas a Califas and Back to Chicago. Accepting for Cortez will be Cesario Moreno from the National Museum of Mexican Art. Join me in welcoming Carlos Cumpián to our stage.
Pleasure to be here. You all get an award for finding a parking spot, I'm sure. Those of you who. Carlos Cortez never drove a car. He did a poster of himself sitting in a car, driving a car. He did a poster of himself with his little dog, Aristophanes, his philosophical Greek dog, who probably was telling him some very existential things. Yeah, Carlos never drove, and he was either walking, sometimes occasionally flying. He even took a boat once to Europe and back in the 50s, where he went to Greece to meet his wife's parents, rather. How do I know any of this? Well, some of this stuff is public knowledge, but I met Carlos way back at Clifton and Belden, right by DePaul University, when he lived there right off on Clifton, on the corner there with his wife. And I had just moved into the building, and I was on the street walking home, and my hair was long, and he saw me going by, and he said, "Excuse me," and he had his Western hat on. It was like in October sometime, and he said, "Hey, excuse me," and I said, "Yeah." There was this man with, "What's up?" He goes, "You live around here?" "Yeah, here." "Oh, wow, I live right around the corner." And then he asked me, what I did for a living. I said, "Well, I'm working nearby." And so we got into this thing. He managed to recruit me to join the Industrial Workers of the World in no time. We became friends. He had, in fact, the truth is, I had met him in print before I actually met him in the flesh. And I met him because I bought a copy of this little Lowenfeld's anthology, this gentleman who did the editing for a thing called Poets of Today. Bob Dylan is in it. I mean, Phil Oakes, I think, was in it. Joan Baez, I think, was in it. All these people who we know as singers, songwriters, and folkies did poems, and they stuck them in this collection, right? So that's where I read his stuff before I ever met him. And then I also used to get, some of you may have been Chicagoans back then, I arrived in the fall of '67 to Chicago from Texas, where I'm from. And I used to read the Chicago Seed. Some of you probably read the Chicago Seed. Remember that? And Carlos's poetry was in there, so I read that back then. So again, I had met him through writing before I actually got to meet him, which is, I think, not a bad way to get to say something with somebody. How many of you have said, "Oh, have you read my work?" No. Okay. Carlos's books, two of them, Where Are the Voices? and Crystal Gaze in the Amber Fluid, and other wobbly poems. I think in each case he calls it that. This book here is out of print. You know, it's been out of print. This one still has some copies. This is the library edition, and the print's kind of small, and my eyesight's kind of going. So I decided to. I'm going to read you what has probably been more of a recently analyzed poems. I'm going to read you the poem, a very narrative piece called Requiem for a Street. Some of you might remember this street, may ring a bell. Goes like this. I know the mic doesn't work, so. Well, they've finally gotten around to the street. Those apostles of civic improvement, they are advancing with the cranes and bulldozers, tearing down the old slums so the newer and bigger, loftier slums can be built on this street, once lined with an endless array of small shops, bristos, hole-in-the-wall restaurants, where one could bask in the culinary delights of faraway places, where one could walk by small music stores and hear strange music that somehow was not strange at all, where the sidewalk passerby would be constantly beset by sidewalk pitchmen and gypsy fortune tellers. And where else in this standardized American metropolis could you hear of this wonderful quality and ridiculously low price and the latest fashions and suits being extolled to you in Spanish with a Yiddish accent? Or the gypsy girls who could take one quick size up and start handing you their con line in the tongue of your ancestors. It was not the cleanest of streets, not here in this unclean city, but it was a happy street, happy with the smell of pizza, roasted lamb heads, Turkish coffee, and tacos. Happy with the raucous babble of many voices, happy with the voices of the ghettos of Bucharest, Odessa, and Wilno, happy with the voices from Piranhas and Salonika and Plata, happy with the voices of those who had known only the rooftops of Romanian, Hungarian, and Serbian skies, happy with the voices from Morelia, Iztapilapa, and Nuevo Laredo, happy with the voices from Caguas, Ponce, and Arecibo, yes, happy with the voices from Mobile, and Beaumont, and Chattanooga, and happy with the voices from Palermo, and Cantana, and small United Nations that somehow wasn't completely united and somehow it didn't make too much difference. And true, it was quite a din, but it was a human din, and it was a mess, but it was a human mess. Not like the din that we heard on the street now, the mechanical roar of cranes, the mechanical thump of the large ball, and the mechanical roar of the bulldozers directed from distant offices and committees and kickback artists with mechanical mentalities and mechanical hearts. Not like the mess left in the wake of the redevelopment of the juggernaut, leaving behind a mess that would put a B-29 to shame. The rubble creeps up on the last remaining pawn shops, bodegas, and pizzerias, the last remaining small haberdasheries and cafeneos and taquerias, street of zucchini, bacalao, and enchilada. At last you are falling before the advance of standardization, street of olives and snails and avocados. One day, your days are now numbered, street of Chianti, Mazella, Resina, of Uzo, Arak, and Tequila, with your guitar-thumping cantinas and belly-dancing tavernas. Those who do not know you have had the power to destroy you before advancing to the distance, falling in the wake of bulldozers and rising above the clouds of dust of your corpse or your brand new tombstones called civic redevelopment, human anthills that look like a combination of cell block and skyscraper. Yes, they are building bigger and better tenements that are destined to become bigger and better and blighter areas. And you good citizen and city planners, you with fat pocket contractors, you with jobs that are completed and now you can come down here and take a look at your accomplishments. Are you honestly going to believe that you made any real improvements other than into the health of your checkbook? Now, Carlos was a writer for the Industrial Worker newspaper, and he wrote editorials and he wrote under the pen name C.C. Red Cloud, Alfredo Rubenojas, he took a few names. Occasionally he actually used his own. Some of his poetry, surprisingly, got well beyond a radical rag. And you would say, okay. And here's a guy who would be asked time and again, I was in his presence when it happened. Where are you teaching, professor? Where did you get your degree? Stuff like that. He never went to the university. He never made it into a college, really. And I don't think he did all that well in the high school realm. But here he is in a multicultural anthology for high school students. And so he says in this collection, this is the land. And here he, coming from a perspective of a Mexican and German background, it's interesting how he brings together some things. I will tell you this, that as a visual artist, you can catch a lot of his work, of course, at the National Museum of Mexican Art. You can go there, you can see a lot of his work there. You may even find some of his books there. This is the land. Out in the sun-swept llanos, where imperceptible chants of long-dead tribesmen and imperceptible hoofbeats of the long-dead buffalo are lost on the ears of the speedy motorist and the barreling semi-driver. The sun beats down upon the parched grass and naked rock croppings of the horizonless eternity of flatlands of the Dakota, the Arapaho, the Kansa and Kiowa, and the escaped antebellum fugitive slave and the sod-busting homesteaders, the farmed-out Okies and Arkies, y los braceros, los alambres y los mojados, where millennium before La Raza rested on their long trek from the Bering Straits to Anahuac, Tenochtitlan, y Mayab. And 2,000 generations después, we're returning to their tramping grounds. And I'm going to stop there. I'm going to say, Carlos was always interested in Chicago's immigrants, and he knew so many languages, having worked in a bookstore and in a record shop in Milwaukee before coming to Chicago, where he acquired at least the ability to greet and meet and give salutations and good farewells in many different languages for people who were looking for their home country music at a place called Toppings on the south side of Milwaukee. I will tell you that many people have discovered Carlos Cortez, and in 2023, which would mark his 100th birthday, there will be, of course, many celebrations and observances going on. In fact, I suspect rather that those people who would like to read his literature, that his publisher, the Charles H. Kerr people, will probably take his two books, put them into one, and make that collection available by 2023. And now it is my great pleasure and honor, again now, to present this to Cesario Moreno, who is the key curator for the National Museum of Mexican Art. Por favor, pásale. And come on by. Muy bien.
It is an honor on behalf of the National Museum of Mexican Art to receive this in the name of Carlos Cortez, a dear friend and artist of many of us, mentor. And it's funny because so many of the things that you mentioned about him are the things that really come through in his artwork, in his prints, as well as in the way he conducted himself every single day. I first met Carlos in 1988 when I went down to the Mexican Fine Arts Center Museum, which you almost said. The Mexican Fine Arts Center Museum, it was, now it's National Museum of Mexican Art. 1988, I walked in there. I had just finished undergrad, and here in this small gallery of prints, they were his prints, was Carlos. And as Carlos Cumpián mentioned, when you met Carlos, you never forgot it. Whether it was the big mustache, whether it was the welcome, whether it was the hat, the cane. I mean, so many memorable things circled around him. And after talking with me and taking some time, I went back home thinking, oh, he is the founder. This guy, this is his museum that he's starting. I had no idea that he was an artist who was sitting in his gallery or in his exhibition and just talking to everybody, anybody, and encouraging them to go and create prints about things that were close to their heart. As mentioned, Carlos is a poet, a writer, he's an artist, he was an activist. I don't always know how to describe Carlos. I don't know if I should say he's an artist who has social justice on his mind, or if he's a champion organizer of social justice who makes art. He is both of those things, and he is an elder. I saw him as an elder and as a mentor. A few years after meeting him, I asked him if he would give me a tour of the murals in Pilsen, and I asked him, could I record it? And he said, yes, no problem. He did say, come pick me up, and we'll drive around and we'll look at them all. And he spent the whole day. And that's the way Carlos was with everybody. Anybody who was curious, Carlos loved them and encouraged it. Went back to his house, a home of ouzo and mezcal and music from around the world. Just an incredible person. At the National Museum of Mexican Art, we've had 3 exhibits for Carlos. The first one that I walked into by mistake in '88. Then we had a solo exhibition of his in '97, all of his print work. And in the middle of the gallery, we created a stage, and we brought his printing press in for the run of the show, because Carlos would show up and he would tell stories. And that stage became such a magical little place for tiny kids, for high schoolers, and for college people. Carlos really fit in with the mission of the museum in so many ways, and I guess that's why I'm here today on behalf of the museum to accept this. The last exhibit we had of Carlos was the year he passed away, in 2005. In the Torres Gallery, we reconstructed his living room, his famous living room, with the couch and the oriental rug, and then we put paneling on the gallery walls all the way around to make it feel like his home. And then artists from the neighborhood, artists from the Chicagoland community, they made beautiful tributes to him, portraits of him, works that were inspiring, and we put those up. That was just a few months after he passed away. It was during our Day of the Dead exhibition, and it was a fitting tribute, because there's no way we could have just done one altar, one ofrenda to a man like Carlos. He was too big. We're now working with one of the funders here, Donnelly Foundation, to try to get Carlos's story out. We are fortunate that Carlos early on recognized that the mission of the museum was also his mission. And he wrote in his will that the museum would sort of collect all his pieces, his lino cuts, his wood cuts, the actual blocks, under the condition that if his artwork one day becomes so expensive that the average person cannot afford it, we are to run off more and flood the market to bring those prices down. Very, very much like Carlos. Registrars hate to even think of that, of course. And so the fact that we're free, the fact that we're in the community, the fact that the museum was built in a blue-collar, working-class neighborhood was everything that he was about. The Donnelly Foundation is helping us to get his legacy out there. We have his artwork, but we also want his story to be told. We want people to be excited about him and learn about him. We want people to become curious about Carlos Cortez. And we will also be working towards that 100th centennial anniversary coming up in 2023. You hit the nail right on the head when you were talking about Carlos. He's somebody who really would see you and really love you. And in a way, he would see the me in him and them in us. And I guess that's just the way of saying that he understood the humanities, right? He understood this long history of the world and how we're kind of all the same. And we want the same things. In closing, I do just want to say that if Carlos was here today to accept this, he would not let this moment go by without raising our consciousness and saying something about immigrants at the border who are really having a very difficult life, about people crossing all kinds of borders, whether it's the southern border here or a border in the Middle East. He would also be here probably talking about voting and how everybody really needs to have that right and how we have to fight for that right. He would be talking anti-fascism, as he always did, and really talking about how Black lives do matter. Carlos definitely would have embraced the Black Lives Matter movement wholeheartedly. The last thing I'll say is that the Native people's voices were always a part of his writings and his prints and his artwork. And without a doubt, he would be one of the first to say that Native voices need to be heard, they need to be recognized and honored, because they are the true caretakers of this earth. And with that, I thank you on behalf of Carlos Cortez and on behalf of the National Museum of Mexican Art. Thank you.